Hello, everybody. It's David Morgan at David Morgan Education, and we're restarting the webinar on why bright kids guess short words instead of reading them. And so, just to recap what we've just discussed, we're based here in Oxford. I'm sat here with Lydia and Eleanor helping me today. We also have offices in the US and the Far East. And our focus over the last 20 years has been researching literacy to try to get new solutions to a very old problem that has been a great frustration for people for literally centuries. And so our mission is to bring practical solutions to make progress easier for every child. I struggle to read myself, so I really know what that feels like. And I can remember my mother's frustration with it. And, you know, you don't have to be in this game long to know how hard it is for teachers, for children, for parents. It can be very painful. So the first thing that we're talking about is the book, which is, this is partly to promote, which is called The 9 Main Causes of Reading Difficulty. And the title tells you that this isn't a simple issue. And but what we have found is that once you understand the issue, the problem that a child is facing, then the solution for that child is often quite simple and straightforward, and indeed sometimes even obvious. And so each of the 9 chapters is based around the patterns that you might see. So the first one, which we will be discussing a little bit, the first chapter is guesses with short words and spells poorly in free writing. The second chapter is skips words or whole lines and struggles with small text. You may have seen that. We're going to have a quick discussion on that. Hang on, we're getting a message saying there isn't a picture. Sorry? But you can see it, can you? Great, yeah. So yeah, so we were going to do a mixed live presentation and PowerPoint. Facebook Live doesn't seem to let us switch between the two, so we've restarted just with the PowerPoint because we got some useful images for you to see. You miss out on seeing me, but that's not a great loss. So yeah, so each of the 9 chapters just has a simple pattern that you'll see. It just gives a simple explanation as to what's causing that pattern, and then a solution that you can apply. So it's a very practical book. And you know, we're doing a discount code on it today. You can find it on Amazon, and I will give you that discount code at the end on the last screen. Okay, so let me just so this is the number of adults out of 100 who struggle to learn to read a book or read an extended article. They can read short sort of sections of text, and they can find sort of TV listings and that sort of thing, but they're not comfortable reading extended text. That's nearly half the population. So this is a huge issue which is impacting these people every day, and of course it makes school very, very tough. So these issues that we've been looking at really are significant for the people involved. So the first pattern I wanted to just quickly talk about, because it's so common and the solution is so quick and easy that I can't resist it, is this small print. You know, do people have children who are finding the small print harder to read than large print? If you do, give us a thumbs up in the yeah, I'm seeing some activity there. Okay, so this is an interesting one because all these children have been for an eye test, you know, so they've either got 20/20 vision or they've got glasses to adjust so that they do. So we know that they can see the letters, but why do they then not read the words when the text is smaller? I mean, as a proficient adult, there is really no difference. In fact, small text up to a point is a little bit easier than very large text. So if you've got an idea on that, just stick it into the comments. So they can see the letters, but they can't see the words when they're reading. Has anybody got an idea? If anybody gets this, I'll send them a book for free as a gift. Okay, so the reason is that when you go to the eye for an eye test, they test each eye individually. They actually cover the eye they're not testing. And then they don't really, you sort of look through the glasses, both glasses at the end, but they're not actually testing that very carefully, how the eyes are working together. And a lot of children, when something's at about arm's length, they struggle with the convergence their eyes have to do, and their eyes struggle to track along the line. And so I can demonstrate what that looks like for them. So here is a bit of text which I have made a copy of and then slightly shifted the second copy. And you can see that the top text is distorted, but is definitely readable. But the second line becomes illegible. And this is the effect of this convergence difficulty for these children. And so it's really very simple once you see it. So we now know what the problem is. What is the solution? Again, if anybody's got an instant idea on that, we will send them a book. So I've got a 10-day fix. What you need to do is finger tracking exercises. It's so simple. All you do is you put your arm out, about, your child puts their arm out comfortably at the sort of distance they'd be reading a book, so not stretched out, but at a comfortable distance, probably about 12 inches from their nose. And then they stare, they put one finger pointing at the ceiling and stare at a point on the back of the finger, and then just move it in a very small circle, about 6 inches, say, and they just go around in a circle, staring at the back of that finger, locked on, as if their life depended on it. We call it, laser eyes. They're trying to burn a hole in the back of their finger, and they do that for like 15 seconds, and then stop. Because if you have difficulty with this, that is actually a tiring exercise. Some children won't actually be able to do more than about 4 or 5 seconds, and that's fine. Just start with 4 or 5 seconds. If you can see them losing lock on, then just stop, because there's no point in continuing. And then the key thing is you need to aim for 5 to 10 sessions a day. So an hour later, they do another session, and an hour later, they do another session. And it's that regular routine through the day that gets this very quick result. So there is a whole industry based on this called vision therapy, where you go weekly for, sometimes months on end, and they give you a long set of exercises to do once a day. And it's very ineffective, because that is not a good neurological basis. It's that short exercise with very strong focus that gets the results by repeating it through the day. Okay, I hope that's a win for some people if you've already seen that. And the key thing is that when you're doing reading practice, just keep the text big enough. Don't try to make the text small to practice reading with small text. Do the exercises to help with that, but then keep the text big when you're doing reading practice. So this is the focus for our talk today. The key thing is, why do bright kids guess short words despite the fact they can read longer ones? And you will often see similar patterns like that. So one thing which is absolutely fine is to send any questions you've got as we go along. Just pop them in the comments, and we can send answers straight back, or they can pass them to me at the end. So these children are guessing these short words. They're also reading a word on one page often, and then sometimes not reading it correctly on the next page, even though they've just done it. There's quite often switching a B and D on a no, was and saw, that sort of thing. Sometimes the comprehension is surprisingly low. You've got a bright child, they're reading the words out correctly, but then they don't follow it. And also that will tend to lead to them being a little bit resistant to reading, because of course it's boring if you're just reading words without understanding them. And then the last one is that almost always learning spelling lists is a complete waste of time. You do the list week after week, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, those exact same words are misspelled in their free writing. And usually their free writing, the spelling is atrocious. So let's look at why that is. So these children are what we call whole word sight readers. So they may have done a lot of phonics training at school and this sort of thing, but often they've got very good visual memories. So when they start reading an early reader book, there's only like 10, 15 words in the book, and they just can memorize them. Often they memorize the whole book. So, and that seems to go well, and everyone's pleased because they've read the book. And then they carry on like this, and it's all going fine until the number of words in the book gets higher and higher. So these people are memorizing what the word looks like. So a word like cow, they are memorizing the shape of and the look of the word, and just in the same way as they can recognize a cow, they can recognize the word cow. And that explains part of this flipping, because if you take a picture of a cow and you flip it over, it's still a cow. There's nothing obviously has changed. If you're looking at the word in the same way, you can flip it and still see the word. And what a classic example of that is Leonardo da Vinci, who is a classic dyslexic, in the sense his reading was not that great, and his writing was famously badly spelled. But he was able to write back to front just routinely, and so it's an example of how what we think of as if you're a good reader, then the text is very strongly left to right. But for these children, that's less the case, because they're seeing just a series of pictures effectively. So you can see here in this picture of the brain, so you've got the eyes on the left-hand side of the picture. We see text with our eyes, obviously, and that information goes to the visual cortex, which is at the back of the brain. And then the information on what words they have seen and recognized goes straight to the frontal lobe. Now that connection between the visual cortex and the frontal lobe is a strong one. We're using it all day, every day, as we navigate the world. And so it's very easy for them to use that. And particularly when they've got this very good visual memory, they can do quite well. And we sometimes see children at grade level, 8 or 9, with their reading, but their big frustration is their spelling. The problem is that in English, there are over 1 million words. A literate person can routinely read about 15 to 20,000 words. Somebody who's a specialist, like a journalist, would be able to read 30, 40,000 words. So you can see this is a big problem, that you cannot memorize tens of thousands of words. And so the further they go, the harder progress becomes. And you tend to see a plateau forming where they're reading. So sometimes it's 7 or 8, other times a little bit later, and sometimes earlier, sort of 5 or 6. They're hitting frustrations very quickly. And that is why you're seeing them guessing these short words, because the short words all look very similar. A long word often has a more distinctive shape, and also has a lot more context to it. So if you're reading a book about Babar the elephant, and there's a long word which starts with an EL, you can pretty much guess it's going to be elephant, but this, that, those, then, there, they all look the same. And they're quite interchangeable in context. And so those are the words that then you see a lot of errors with, and are the sort of defining pattern with this. Now this is what we want to change their reading strategy to. So they see the words as before, but now what they're looking at is the letters in the words, and that is communicated to the auditory cortex in the middle of the brain. It's just inside from your left ear. You got your auditory cortex, which is tied into your linguistic cortex. So the letter patterns are turned into sounds, which are blended to form words. And actually most of us can hear a little voice as we read. And that is because your auditory cortex is generating this voice in our head from the letters. And once you do that, all of your normal linguistic comprehension just kicks into gear, and you can understand what you're reading. So then the next arrow to the frontal lobe is not so much the individual words, but the comprehension, the semantic understanding of the words. That last little arrow going from the frontal lobe to what's called Broca's area is for when you're actually reading out loud. Broca's area is what allows you to speak. And so there's that final loop for if you're reading out loud. So this is the pattern that we want to create. And this is the one that's a challenge for somebody who's naturally drawn towards reading whole words. So we have a solution to this, which takes a little longer than the eye tracking, but it's not too bad, 100 days in the scheme of things. So what we call it is trainer text visual phonics, or TVP. And I got a little example here. We got 3 words: gas, has, and was, which, are typical of annoying words for children, because they're taught the rules. Gas is gas, but then her ass doesn't work. And normally when a child is in that situation, they're just stuck, and they can guess maybe, or they can ask for help, in which case you give them an auditory prompt. But what we're trying to do is build this visual to auditory channel in their brain. So we got the trainer text here, and above gas you can see you got the goat in the boat, the ant in pink pants, and the seal with the wheel. So you got gas. The image represents the sound of the first of the name of the image, so G for goat. With has, we got the horse, the ant, and the Zuto from Pluto. So the S has gone from the seal to the Zuto. So now when the child says has, it doesn't make sense. They can look up and see the Zuto and say, oh, has. And then has the octopus above the A. So you got was. So now, instead of repeated failure, the child keeps succeeding and also practicing that decode. And our brain, and particularly our subconscious brain, is really a pattern sort of logging system. When we ride a bike, we don't actually know how we're doing it, but the brain has noticed what works and what doesn't from quite a few little crashes early on. And eventually it gets the sense of how to balance the bike just through pattern recognition. It's not doing a physics calculation or anything like that. It just does what it knows works. And reading and writing and speaking or walking and catching balls, all these skills are the same. You've got to do your practice, and when you do the practice the right way, you become skilled. And so that is the solution to this. We have run thousands and thousands of children through a trainer text visual phonics process. Every single one of them now learns to read. Literally, it's years since I've seen a child not progress. And so we're very confident that this is a step change in performance of the methodology. And I hope it makes sense and is pretty simple to follow. So next steps is actually to start using it if you've got a child that's struggling with this. So you can, there's some free printable resources at our site, helpingchildrentoread.com. We also have an online TVP system called Easyread, and you can do a free trial of that. That's a much more supported process, so there is a subscription to it, but with that we guarantee every child gets to the right gets significant progress in those 100 days. And then, of course, there's the book, where you can check the other 7 issues that are good to be aware of and looking out for, because if you start to see the patterns of them, there are simple ways to make the progress easier for your child, and that reduces stress for them, and it reduces stress for everyone else, so it's all good. So there's an Amazon discount code, which is that 20010850. It's effectively cost, it would be great when you've finished with it, you've got no more use for it, just give it to your school or give it to your library or something, and put a review on Amazon, which would be incredibly helpful for us if you think it's a useful book. Fantastic. So that's all I got. I try to keep it short. Parents and teachers are busy people, and so but I can answer any questions that need answering. Lydia.
So I'll start with one that's literally just come in. It's very good. So
Yeah.
From Lucia.
Yeah, from Lucia.
My child can pass the weekly spelling test, but by the following week can't remember what she learned. Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah. So the question is, Lucia's daughter does the spelling list each week, and then like a week or 2 weeks later, those same words are very difficult for her to spell. So this is a classic pattern for these children. So sometimes they can actually get 10 out of 10 in the spelling list, and then within days it's sort of dissolved like sand when the tide comes in, and the sandcastles. So what's happening is that, Lucia, is your daughter is memorizing the list of words like a picture, literally. Some of these people have virtually got a photographic memory, and so she's memorizing the look of the words, and she's able to produce that on the Friday. But holding an image like that long term is very hard. The visual memory isn't designed to work like that. It's like we all recognize a friend with ease. Unless you're a very good artist, it's hard to draw a friend and from memory. And so it's the same. She's trying to redraw these things. She's not working with the code of the letters in the word. Now, what we find is we help quite a lot of children with their spelling, even though we run a reading program. And the reason we can do that is because we change how they read. They start to read by analysis of the letters and the sounds. And the brain is storing all of that in this subconscious mapping. So soon you start to feel what the word is without having to check the images and that sort of thing. You just more and more, you're feeling the words as you read. And that starts to happen over those sort of 100 lessons. At the same time, that same mapping is being developed so that you can start to spell with it. It's a little harder, so it takes a little longer, but the spelling starts to come through. And you'll probably know, I mean, I hardly ever write now, so I can hardly write with a pen. But when I'm typing on the keyboard, the words appear on the screen without me knowing where the keys are on the keyboard. I mean, literally, if you say press the letter K, I sort of know it's somewhere in the middle, but exactly which key it is, I don't know. But my brain just generates these words from my subconscious and controls my fingers, and they appear on the screen. And in fact, if you stop to think about the spelling of a word, often it becomes a little less sure. It's a lot safer just to write down a word. If somebody asks you for a spelling, just write it down and then show it to them. If you try to think about a spelling, it becomes less sure because it's not what's called a declarative memory system. It's a procedural memory system. That's in this subconscious process. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so Marie has asked whether this is good for dyslexic children, and the answer is absolutely. So a lot of the dyslexic children are showing this pattern of whole word sight reading. And often it's because they've got this very good visual memory. It comes from a strength, not from a weakness. Occasionally, we also get children showing that pattern when the auditory processing is hard for them. And that often comes from a little bit of glue ear or something like that when there's like 1 or 2 or 3. So just as the whole auditory system is being developed very fast in those early years and speech is being developed, their hearing is a little just slightly muffled, and it affects their auditory development. And for instance, I definitely have that. You know, even now, auditory processing is a little harder for me, and I had loads of. I was constantly ill when I was a child, and so if that's the case, you know, you can see this whole word sight reading just because the phonics and the phonics manipulation and hearing is a little harder. But we do find that the trainer text helps those children very much because it sometimes clarifies the sounds in the words, which they hadn't actually been that sure of. So their speech often improves a little bit too. So those are two potential patterns for dyslexia. Another one is the words moving around on the page thing, which is fixed really with colored overlays. So it's a separate thing, but you know, is relatively unusual, I have to say. Most people leap to the colored overlays. We don't see a lot of children needing it. Great, Lydia.
She was asking about the flip when you talk about word flipping.
Yeah.
And she said she's seen a child sounding the word out backwards, but then getting the right word.
Yes. Okay. So Kirsty's saying that she's seen flipping and that sort of thing, but her child can sound out and can sound out backwards and then reads it out the right way. So this is an interesting thing, and that is that the brain is one of the mystical creations of the universe. We don't really understand it. It can do so many things. So all of the things I've been talking about today are sort of simplifications. I mean, you know, one of the patterns I was saying, for instance, is that you know, when a whole word sight reader goes from visual cortex to auditory cortex, they are actually sort of bypassing the linguistic processing cortex. So often the comprehension is lower than it would be, but at other times it's not. You know, so sometimes you see a child who can read out loud accurately, you know, but then doesn't have a clue, literally, what they've just read. And other times the comprehension is quite good. You know, you got a child who's is doing a decode backwards and then reading the word out the right way. It's absolutely magical. But you know, these things happen, and almost all your children will have had phonics training. So this is something which has been done and is in there. It's just that the phonics coaching you get is all about rules, and it's very hard to learn all the rules. The rules don't work the whole time. And so bright children just get frustrated with them and say, you know, you teach me these rules and then these letters and these words don't work with it. So I'm just going to use what I know works, which is memorizing. And so that's why you see that pattern, even though they've had a lot of phonics, conventional phonics coaching. Fantastic. Are we good? Alrighty, well, there we go. That's our chat for today. If you're watching this at another time, just send us, I can send it. We got a little screen here showing you different ways. So we've been taking a few comments on the live chat today, but you can send us an email using support@dmed.com. You can just give us a call. You know, it's amazing, isn't it, that people always sort of hide from the telephone. We love it when people call to chat, and you know, we're happy to advise and try to get solutions for people. So do give us a call if you want to. And it's been a pleasure. And if this has been useful, please do share it with anybody who you think could enjoy it. All right, thanks very much and have a great evening.